maybe it was because there was music everywhere. It wasn't impossible to get tickets. There was no Ticketmaster. There were no scalpers. I don't ever remember not being able to see a show.
Hi, I'm Hattie Webb, and this is All Over the Place podcast, where the fun sanity never ends.
Hello and welcome back to All Over the Place. I'm your host, Eric Porvoznik. As always, thanking all of our new subscribers. Thank you so much for joining us here on All Over the Place, liking and sharing. And also thankful for Jim Culver. How are you, Jim?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Fantastic. And the fifth time, as always, with us, folks, is the charm. And joining us today here on All Over the Place, we've got a singer, songwriter, guitarist, composer. He's got a brand new album out called Walking Through the Blues. Please welcome to All Over the Place, Steve Postell. Thanks for joining us, Steve.
Great to be here.
So I mentioned, got Walking Through the Blues, and you're making an album in a climate where, albums have just kind of, for better, as far as I'm concerned, worse, just aren't as important as they used to be. So what inspires you to go out and put an album out in today's streaming culture?
Well, that's the tradition that I come from. I grew up, there was nothing more exciting than going and getting the new Beatles album or the new Hendrix album or whatever it was, and sitting there and listening to it. And I know that's not how younger people listen to music. They stream, they listen to one song at a time. But I believe in the format. I think that certainly a lot of older fans definitely do and like to sit and listen through to a record. So that's how I like to make music. I like to wait until I have a batch of songs, somewhere between 9 and 12 songs that are ready to go, and put it in album form. And at this point, fortunately, there's still labels that like that. My label, Quarto Valley Records, who put out the Immediate Family records, was into it. So I still, if I'm going to listen to music and I really like an artist, I want to listen to more than one song. That's how I do it. So.
Well, as you can see, there's a few albums surrounding me. There's more to my immediate left as well, and the CDs are down below. But yeah, it's music. It's meant to be enjoyed. Dropping that needle or pressing play or whatever, and it's the experience. I cannot say that enough on this show. And just as a music fan, and so thank you for putting out an album that just takes you through a journey from start to finish. I love that.
Well, it is a story. It's our version of a novel, where not that there necessarily has to be a theme. There are theme records, which are Quadrophenia and so on from The Who, but there's usually it represents a time of life, and this is where I'm at right now musically, and so if it's done well or authentically, you'll listen to it and be taken to that place, wherever that place is, on some level where I am, and I just like the process.
Yeah, don't need a concept album to have a book with a bunch of good chapters in it. Love it. With music, where we come from, similar backgrounds of just loving music and wanting to listen to albums. But when was it for you where the music bug bit? And when did you know that you were not going to ever have a cure for the rockin' pneumonia and the boogie woogie flu?
Really, really early with me in my case. When I was, I mean, there was music around because my parents had this phenomenal record collection, which I have actually inherited. And so I grew up listening to everything from Benny Goodman to Leadbelly to Beethoven and it was a very eclectic selection. So I had music sort of coursing through me already. But when I was 5 years old, I grew up in New York City. I was walking through Central Park with my mother, and some guy was sitting on the lawn, the great lawn there, playing the guitar and singing, and I was completely mesmerized. Whatever it is, whatever my DNA, I just couldn't leave. And that was kind of really blew my mind, and I kept saying, what was that? How can I see more of that? So they took me to see Segovia, the famous classical guitarist, maybe Carnegie Hall or Town Hall. And that was a profound experience. But then within 6 months later, the Beatles played on Ed Sullivan. I was in the room watching. My parents watched that show, and I came in, and that was it. I mean, between the Guy in the Park and then Segovia and then the Beatles, uh, I really never strayed from this is the greatest thing in the world, and I have to have it.
I love that, and especially the eclecticism. But I was kind of waiting for that person turned out to be Paul Simon, or it wasn't Bleecker Street, so I figured it wasn't Bob Dylan, so Central Park. But that's just awesome.
No, it's just some guy with a guitar. Yeah,
Yeah,
I,
just
I,
that's
I
all it
did.
takes.
I did see a lot of great music growing up in New York City at that time. It was endless. The opportunity to see. I would every weekend, starting when I was 12 or 13. One weekend it'd be Duke Ellington, and then Mahavishnu, and then Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee, and then Doc Watson, and then and on and on and on, and then Al Green, and then the Persuasions. That it was the amount of music that was available was unbelievable as a template for what it could be in our lives. And also, I've said this. One of the things that's interesting is, although it was very popular, obviously, because there was music, and maybe it was because there was music everywhere, it wasn't impossible to get tickets. There was no ticket master. There were no scalpers. I don't ever remember not being able to see a show that I wanted to see.
Oh. As someone who grew up in small town Ohio, so jealous of that. Just to be able to, on a whim, just go and you're surrounded by that amazing line. Just that small sample size is just all those artists.
It was
Wow.
amazing. Everyone I loved, the band, Poco, anything that I loved when it came to New York. Now, sometimes you got better seats, it didn't matter. And the Fillmore East was still going strong,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a legendary place and there were no curfews, there was no union. So if the guys wanted to play till 5 in the morning, they played till 5 in the morning, literally.
Oh yeah.
It was a very special time culturally, and also particularly as a musician, being able to experience. I mean, one night, I remember a night at the Fillmore East. The lineup was Butterfield Blues Band with with Mike Bloomfield on guitar. It was B.B. King, and it was Elvin Bishop Band, who had been with Paul Butterfield, and then at the end of the night, they all played, and they just kept. Oh no, actually, and they played till the sun came up, and that's how it usually was back then. It was Leon Russell. Actually, it was Leon Russell Band. That's right. It was an amazing night.
Wow. And then of course you make the switch to the other coast, and when you're again expanding your musical palette and compare the two. Okay, and obviously New York's got its vibe, LA's got its more of a laid back vibe. So what was that like for you to bring what you had from New York and taking that to the other coast?
Well, I came out here late. I didn't come out here till about 2004. I mean, I'd been coming out for sessions or to do a record date, but to actually live here. And I've heard from my friends, especially the guys in the immediate family who came out here like 69, 70. This was an incredibly vital place also back then, in a slightly different way, when they were all hanging out in Laurel Canyon and so on and so forth. By the time I left New York, the scene had been priced out, essentially. Like 80% of the music clubs were gone. Everything cost too much. It cost too much to park, let alone. So the way it just felt being there, and the accessibility to everything, had really dried up. It had become difficult, and so moving out here is more expansive. There's more room. It was uh, a little more creative, and the ability to get around and have space, and have more places to play had moved a little bit to the West Coast.
And you mentioned the immediate family. How did you get hooked in with that? Because I mean, Leland Sklar, I mean, Dan Korchmar, Michael McDonald, Russ Kunkel, some really heavy hitting names. And just what got you involved with those guys?
Well, as a session player, I had met and had different. I had Waddy Wachtel played on one of my records, and so individually, I had met almost everybody, but I hadn't met Danny Korchmar, who's kind of the linchpin ringmaster of Immediate Family. But I was making a record at the time on Emergent Records, and the guy who was mixing it was Nathaniel Kunkel, who's Russ Kunkel's son. And Nathaniel said, "Hey, I'm recording a show at the Troubadour. It's the James Taylor Carole King reunion show at the Troubadour. You should come be my guest and come see the show." He's Russ Kunkel's son, of course. And so I went to the show, which was remarkable. The original band that had played there 50 years before with James and Carol. And I met Danny. And so we hit it off right away, had a lot in common, both our musical background and just East Coast guys. And we started, when he started coming out here and eventually moved out here, we just started writing and recording here in the studio, and we started doing gigs together. And so that sort of one thing led to the other, where we went to Japan and did a little thing, not Immediate Family, pre-Immediate Family, me and great band with me and Danny, and from Jackson Brown's band, we had Bob Glaub and the late Jeff Young, and we had Steve Holley from Wings on drums. And Danny got offered and solidified a deal in Japan to do a record that was going to be Danny singing a bunch of the hits that he'd written, which is quite a few for people who don't know. I mean, he wrote Somebody's Baby and Dirty Laundry and New York Minute and on and on. And so we came back to this room that I'm sitting in and did a bunch of pre-production, and he called his best friends. He called Jackson to see if we could use Jackson's studio to cut the basics. He called Leland, he called Waddy, and he called Russ, and we all met in the studio, and the band was born very, very organically and very quickly. By the second day of recording, I think we were essentially a band.
And Jim, our resident drummer, I'm going to throw it up to you. Get some music-minded questions in here for Steve.
So I listened to the album and really enjoyed it. The word that kind of kept popping into my head was soulful, incredibly soulful album. So just kind of want to get an idea of where your inspiration came from. I know you said there wasn't kind of any overarching theme, but what were kind of some of the ideas and feelings that inspired that album?
Well, it's a multifaceted question, really, because on one hand, if you are a songwriter by sort of trade or by choice, you're always writing. I've been writing since I was 14, when I thought I'd written a song. But my first song, I was all excited. I was 14, and I wrote it. It's called Mr. Sandman, and I went and I played it for a couple of friends of mine, and one of my friends said, "Isn't that the same melody as Mr. Tambourine Man by Bob Dylan?" So my first song, I inadvertently lifted the exact melody off of a Bob Dylan song. So I've always had a lot of sympathy for George Harrison and his supposed theft of a song, because he said it must have been subconscious, and I've had that happen to me for my first song. Anyway, so I'm always writing, and so I think the writing moves along with time as you get more experience in life and more experience as a writer and as a musician. Hopefully, there's some kind of progression, and what happens with the records is, I guess this is my 6th record. Eventually, you go, "Hey, I got 14 new songs, that I like." And I've always had a recording studio, which you're looking at right now, and so it's not a big deal for me to say I'm going to start recording them. And so that's the genesis. Is just I had I had a bunch of songs. There's some themes on this record for sure. I think that definitely a theme that pops up a lot is a theme of looking back. I'm an older guy now than I was when I started, and I have a little bit of a broad zooming out look on my past and life. So I think that's reflected in some of these songs. There's a song called "100 Years Old," which is a guy who's lived 100 years and looking back on his life. And there's "Wait Until You Get Here," which is also a song about, wait till you get to be here in life and see what this is like. And so there's a few songs that sort of reflect that, but it's overall it's just a process. There's a creative process that I write music. Sometimes it's often songs, but sometimes it's maybe a score or a ballet that wants music or something. But I write, and the writing should reflect where I am in life at any given time.
Well, I'm glad we seem to have gone through a breakup in recent months, or whenever whatever you were looking back on. I really liked "Until I Do." Last
That's
song
fun.
I'm going to write about you. ... Until I do.
Yeah.
So thank
Well,
you for that.
It's that came from a funny place. I think a lot of people, certainly I do, and people I know have a singular relationship that was the one that really rocked you to your boots. And often as writers, whether it's a poet or a songwriter, that relationship, one way or another, even if it gets colored and sort of becomes a little fictitious, shows up again and again. And I had a relationship that was very profound and also profoundly difficult getting over, and it shows up in a lot of my songs. And I had sat down to write a song. I had an idea for a melody, and I started thinking about that relationship. I said, no, I'm not going to write another song about that woman, that relationship. I'm not doing it. And then I said, well, until I do, and I was like, oh, that's a good song.
You'll be a song I sing, a thing I throw it away. And that's right, Jim. I haven't been able to quote Paul Westerberg or the Replacements on this show in a while, so I had to go for it. It was inevitable. Am I forgiven? Thank you. So, and another line I really liked on, and this would be from "When the Lights Go Out," is "Don't make me explain about Steely Dan or Acid Rain." Yeah,
It's talking about the song "Hey 19."
Mm-hmm.
You don't know Aretha Franklin, so so he was saying he's dating this younger girl, and she doesn't even know who Aretha Franklin is, and I'm saying, I don't want to explain to you who Steely Dan was, and that they wrote a song about the girl not knowing who Aretha Franklin was. So
there you go. So it was not about how they got their name, which is a rather risque topic anyhow. So yeah, I like that even better now. Yeah, and I was blessed too with parents who gave me a good musical foundation. So mom was the one who called me up on my 19th birthday and sang that song for me as best as she could. So yeah, I get it. And getting back to just those incredible influences that you had, and you've done, you've performed. You've done a lot of behind the scenes work, some studio work as well. So whether as a composer, especially. So what is it about those two different worlds that you find yourself being drawn to, that performing or just doing the back behind the scenes work?
Well, it's an interesting question that's come up in a number of ways, including they made a film. There's a great documentary about the band Immediate Family, and I think I talk about it in there as well. I recommend the film if you're a music lover. So those guys in my band who are 8, 9 years older than me, they came out to LA and they were immediately making records, and they made all the records. There was a group of guys who were on all the great records that were being made. By the time I was of professional playing age, which was young, I mean, I started being a pro at about 19, 20. Those guys in the West Coast were making a lot of the great records. And so those of us who were coming up in New York ended up, just by virtue of what was available, doing a lot of behind the scenes, jingles, Broadway shows, scores, television, because that's what was available for us. And it's not that we didn't play any records, but those guys were pretty established who were making all those great records at the time. So that it was just sort of survival of the fittest. I didn't want to have a job. I wanted to play music. I always loved playing rock and roll and songs and so on, but I also, I didn't. It's not like I minded. I liked doing all kinds of music, but it was kind of what was available for us in New York. Was So a lot of my friends who were coming up in New York, who were my age, as opposed to Danny and Waddy's age and so on, ended up doing all kinds of what you would call behind the scenes studio stuff.
Well, I'm a guy who is very studious with the liner notes. So yeah, all those names, just I love seeing them all over the place. They were, like I said, their imprint is everywhere between them and the Wrecking Crew. They were there. Then they came after the Wrecking Crew. So yeah, it's fun stuff.
I mean,
And
Leland played on over 2,000 records.
yeah.
So go figure that.
And when your last name is Provazic, you like seeing a last name like Sklar. And you mentioned at the top of the show you're in the Our House band, which you guys are performing songs from Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. And what drew you to that project?
Well, that project came out of a 28-year friendship with David Crosby that I had that started as a friendship because we had mutual friends, and eventually writing together, and eventually doing. He had a band, he had that band, he had another band, so I wasn't in the band, but we ended up still doing certain shows. I'd say, hey, I got offered to do this festival. They asked about you, and we'd go do that, or a benefit, whatever. And well, try to make a long story short, is that so one of the times I was visiting with David, and I'd hang out, we'd go to lunch, sometimes we'd write a song, whatever. And he said to me that the surgery he'd had on his hand to fix a problem he was having didn't really work. And he could still pick up a guitar and write on it, but he did not have the strength anymore to get through a show. So he proclaimed to me that he was done performing, and he'd keep singing, and we'd making records. And I, in my smug way, said, well, why don't you let me play the guitar parts and you sing, and then you can keep performing. And he took me up on that. And so I learned he taught me a lot of the great guitar parts that he had that are very iconic and very singular to him. And we put a band together, and we were excited, and he was excited, and we were getting ready to tour. And then out of really nowhere, because we talked the night before, David passed away. So it was very heart-wrenching on many, many levels. And also just that this whole plan of, when you're excited and there's a set, and there's a tour, and there's a band, and then it just disappears. So about 7 months later, his son, James Raymond, who was a musical director of his band for all those years and was doing it with me on this time, we put together a tribute concert with Sean Colvin and Colin Hay and Richard Page, Chris Stills. We did that at the theater we were supposed to play with David to start the tour, and people still had tickets. And we said, we're going to come to the show, we'll honor your ticket. And it was a tribute to him. And it was a beautiful night. Anyway, that led to people saying, why don't you should keep playing this music. It's beautiful music. And that band, now that Crosby's gone, will never play again, obviously. So it led to me connecting with Jeff Pivar, who introduced me to Crosby in 97 or whenever it was, who played with him all those years. And we put together something called Our House to keep playing this great music, and that's what we're doing.
Keeping a legacy alive. It's a great thing when you're able to do that, especially when you're actually friends with one of the people whose legacy you're carrying on. I like that. Yeah,
it feels authentic to me. It doesn't feel cheap, because it's like, he taught me this music. Jeff from the inside, and I can't play it with him, but I can play it for people.
Right.
That's kind of what's happening. Yeah.
Dig. And getting back to walking through these blues and being in LA now, and of course it's been a little while since the previous album. So take us through the process of going through all the LA clubs, whether it's Largo or Troubadour, just those various places, and were you able to workshop those songs before you put them down on the album?
Almost not every. Some of them, some of them I played a lot. Some of them, there was a couple. Like the newest song on the record is called "How Far We've Come," which I wrote with Glenn Phillips from Toad the Wet Sprocket, and that song we recorded before I'd never performed it. We wrote it, put it together, and then I recorded it. But some of the songs I've been playing for years. There's old songs on this record that I sort of repurposed to fit me now, and new songs and so on. But there's songs that I played many times, performed. So there's both are reflected on the record. There's one song I've never performed. It's a little complicated and it's a very specific arrangement, and I've actually never played it live.
And what's the response been like so far with the new songs?
I am happy, very happy to say that there seems to this record seems to be hitting a chord with people, more so than I expected, to be honest. You never know. What I'm getting is that it's not an old sounding record, but it is a throwback to the traditions of melody, real lyrics that have some content to them and maybe some poetry to them, and the putting together the orchestration or arrangements, if you want to call it that, with these incredible musicians who have all this history to what they do. I think it's people are missing that, honestly, is what I'm getting, and they're hearing it in this record and enjoying being able to hear a new record that has some of the qualities of some of their favorite records from, you name it, from Little Feat or James Taylor or Jackson Browne or whatever,
Well, it's definitely an album that you just would set the needle down, press play, kick back, grab your favorite cold one or whatever, and just kick the feet back up and just sit back and enjoy it. Definitely.
Thank you. I mean, I appreciate that, and I'm very pleased in that it seems to be touching a nerve with people. So that's nice.
Always good when you're coming from the heart and it hits with people. As an artist, that's all you can really. It's one thing you really want to be able to connect. Definitely.
Yeah.
And folks, I definitely want to encourage everyone to check out Steve Postell over at stevepostell.com. That's POSTELL.com. You can also check him out on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. Check out the tour dates, both with you going out and performing the album and also with the Our House band as well, correct?
Yeah, that's on bandsintown/ourhouse. That's a website.
Okay.
Our tour schedule's there. Plus, I do post it on Facebook frequently.
Love it. Check the socials, folks. And Steve Postell, thank you so much for joining us here on All Over the Place. And look forward to, I'll keep my eyes open for any Phoenix dates, or maybe up in Vegas. Catch you over there.
We'll be there for sure.
Excellent. Look forward to it. So on behalf of all us here on All Over the Place, thank you, Steve Postell, for joining us. Jim Culver, my friend, thanks as well, sitting in, being here. Everyone, thanks for listening, sharing, subscribing to All Over the Place. Take care. We'll be back real soon.
All Over the Place, where the fun sanity never ends.